Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Hardeep and I'm one of the Golden Cubesnaut and you are on the Kubernetes show. If you are new, welcome to my channel. If you are a returning user, welcome back. Uh, I have been working on this course for last couple of months. It's open free course that I'm trying to create for users who cannot afford to buy a course from a uh, third party providers, for example, Udemy or somewhere else. But this course gives you my view after going through Cubesnaut title, then finally achieving the Golden Cubesnaut title. With that, I'll get started. Today, we are covering the cluster architecture, installation, and configuration, which is about 25% of the course. We'll be looking into RBAC, role-based access control. I got a uh, markdown file prepared for this. This video link, it is set to TBD as of now. I'm gonna upload right after this recording. For preparing underlying infra, we have some documentation available. I didn't want to kind of take too much time to show you how to do it. During the exam, there is a good possibility that you'll have working VMs and you will definitely have access to official Kubernetes documentation, and you can use that documentation to work on this part of the exam if it comes, right? Then next is create manage Kubernetes cluster using kubeadm. We'll look into that as well. Lifecycle management as well as perform version updates. These two topics are kind of combined in perform version updates. For example, if you have a Kubernetes cluster, how would you update the version of it, right? How would you go and update a minor version, let's say 1.33 to 1.34 on your control plane, and finally going and updating on your worker nodes, right? So we'll cover that. You will have definitely one question on this one. So it is a short when if you know the steps. uh, Again, doing hands on is the best way to learn because this exam is hands on, right? So next is implementing a highly available control plane. With the help of kubeadm, you can do it very easily. We'll look into it. We are not going to dive too deep into it, but still, it is simple, it's easy. You can look at the commands, and if you want to test it, create a couple of VMs either in cloud or on your laptop, and you can play with it. Then backup and restore for HCD. It is no longer listed in the documentation, but I believe it's a good skill to have or good knowledge to have. If you know how to back up your HCD, uh, basically it is key value store, it is the heart, and you can say everything is stored in this database. Just in case something happens, a disaster happens, or somebody deletes something, if you have backup, you can restore things from that backup, right? So we'll look into this as well. I already covered this in my previous sections where I talked about Helm and other things, but still, we'll possibly look into this Helm and customization. Then understand extension interfaces, for example, container network interface, container storage interface, container runtime interface, right? So it says understand. I don't believe they're gonna ask you to make any changes to it, but still you should know what these things are, where to go look for configuration files, or how to query certain attributes from these. Then finally how to utilize them, right? When we go into, for example, storage side, uh, m- you are trying to mount a storage in a pod, then this CSI comes into the picture. Then we'll also look into CRDs, custom resource definitions. How do we create? I have one example. We are creating it. Then we can query and see. Uh, it also says understand CRDs. So I don't believe they will ask you to create it from scratch. Then there is something called install and configure operators. Uh, all this one and this one, it looks new to me, but I would say you'll still have access to documentation during the exam. You should be able to kind of look at it and follow the documentation, right? The biggest one during the exam is role-based access control and the lifecycle management or perform version updates. So this question, as well as the manage lifecycle or perform version updates, these two questions for sure will be on the exam. If you can master these, you are basically covering a big chunk of this particular section of the exam, right? So let's get into our file. Again, I mentioned the same thing. You should do hands-on. Theory is good, but if you do hands-on, it's muscle memory. During the exam, it is hands-on. You really need to be fluent. You should be able to very quickly type commands and get things done, right? Most of the things we're going to do will use the Skiller Code Alive playground. I didn't want to do it on my laptop. We can do it in playground, but before I kind of open it, let's talk a little bit theory, right? What is RBAC? So RBAC is role based access control, right? It's a way to control access to Kubernetes resources. Basically, it is a kind of gatekeeper, right? uh, it controls who can do what, where. So what means, can somebody get a, for example, token? Can somebody get the status of a pod, right? That is what. Where means, can somebody query that, whatever, let's say, get status of a pod within a namespace or throughout the cluster or within particular namespaces, right? So that is where. So what, where, which Kubernetes object, right? We talked about, like, for example, pod or secrets, right? So what is role? Now a role is a resource. Basically, in Kubernetes, you are making a so-called definition. You are defining something that says this particular role will give access to users to get, list, delete, for example. Permissions you are defining in a role. Now, what can a user get? Maybe they can get pods, list of pods, right? They can delete pods. Or you can say a user is allowed to create pods, but it is not allowed to delete pods, right? So why do we need a role? Why not directly go and give these permissions to users? That's a very good question. But if you now think about it from a corporate point of view, if you're doing it in your test environment on your laptop, might be okay to do it the way we were thinking, right? Doing it directly to a user. But what if it is a company with thousands of users? It's enterprise grade platform, right? Doing, giving permissions per users will be very hectic. It won't be standardized. So what is the solution is creating something called role. A role defines who will have what kind of access. So what do? We go attach the role to a particular user. So next thing is role binding. That role binding is, it binds Kubernetes resources to set of subjects, right? So what is subject? Subject could be a user or a service account, right? That's what I was talking about. In real life, think of it as a group, for example, right? Role, think of role as a group, and subject as a user, right? But the way it works is, a role is set of permissions, and you are attaching those permissions to a particular subject, a user, or a service account, with the help of role binding, right? So these are two components I mentioned here, right? Central to secure Kubernetes cluster administration. like who can access what, where, and all that, right? We talked about it. It's very important to understand these concepts, understanding the difference between role binding and cluster role binding, also understanding the difference between cluster role and cluster role binding, role and role binding, right? So look at this. A role will always have role binding. Don't do role with a cluster role binding. It has its own implications. We'll talk about it. I have tried to kind of create a table. Maybe it will help you grasping the subject a little better, right? What is the scope for a role? A role is a namespace specific thing. Why it is that way, right? For example, you have finance users. You want them to go and create pods in their finance namespace only, right? So that's why you create role. And those guys have access to pull data from certain pods that are of finance specific things, right? One way of doing it. Network, you are giving access to somebody to maybe uh, deploy daemon sets, maybe, right? In that kind of scenario, you'll have to think about cluster role, right? So it is cluster wide, all namespaces. This is specific to a given namespace, right? A team is deploying, let's say, checkout service. Another team is deploying a web interface or front end service. Another is deploying, for example, a your catalog service, right? Now there are three teams. So one is front end, another is checkout, then is catalog, right? Or inventory. So all these will have their own team members. They need to stay, their permission need to be assigned to a particular namespace so that their roles can stay segregated, right? So that is why role and role binding comes into picture. But what if so you want to give somebody access to entire cluster, right? Somebody should be able to manage entire like daemon sets I was talking about, right, throughout your cluster. In those cases, you'll go and use cluster wide resources, and you will go for cluster role and cluster role binding. So what kind of resources a role can be applied? A role can be applied to pods, secrets, etc., right? Similarly, cluster role, it could be applied to nodes, as I was talking about, right? The daemon set is running on all the nodes. Similarly, if node is shared by all the pods, and everything else that runs on top of it, right? So uh, if you want that kind of control where more than one team's infrastructure is running, you always think about cluster role. It's a kind of higher primitive. Its boundary is bit larger as compared to role, right? So typical user is fine grained access control, as I was talking, dev prod teams, or the checkout team, or inventory team, or catalog team, those kind of things, right? Now here is the cluster role. Either it will be admin or somebody maybe from security team, they want to have access to entire cluster so that they can view the logs, right? Access, cluster wide access will be provided. Infrastructure type of users, which I was talking about, like daemon sets, right? So in those cases, you think about going a cluster role and using cluster role binding. uh, some common examples I have given here. During the exam, you will have to use commands like this. Don't try to write YAML files. Of course, you can. Nobody is stopping you from doing that. You can get into kubernetes.io, look at example, copy paste, try to modify, but you'll end up wasting too much time, right? What's the best way of handling it is on the fly, run it like this and use dry run, right? So with dry run, it gives you YAML file. You want to modify, add things, delete things from it, you can do that, right? So this is the idea. So here what we are doing is we are creating a role named secret reader, and this role is specific to a namespace, as we mentioned here, right? Namespace, it is role. Here we are creating role. You give a name to the role, namespace dev. So if you're not specifying namespace, that's a problem. Then it is kind of going in default namespace, right? You are creating a role name is secret reader, it's in dev namespace. You are giving a list of verbs that it can access. Remember I was mentioning get, list, delete. So all those things you can list here, right? Those are the verbs. Again, you don't need to remember this. Just type command up to here, right? kubectl create role hyphen hyphen help, and you will be able to see very good examples of these, right? So let's do it, and let's go to this killer coda platform. Let me try to launch this and see. So it is giving us a playground with 2 GB, right, nodes. So kubectl create role, if I say help hyphen hyphen help, you can see very nice examples. It is showing verb get get list watch, get list watch, right? So you can do all this. Let me just increase the font a bit, and you can see how you can basically get all this from command help itself, right? kubectl create role help, right? So you can do that. If we, let's say, copy paste this command that I have listed there, and you run as it is throwing a out a YAML file for you that you can use to create, right? So it is creating a secret reader, it's a namespace dev. What resources are allowed for this particular, or the permission to get or list is secrets only. So a secret reader role in dev namespace will allow secrets to be listed and get. If anybody gets this role assigned, they will be able to get and list. Now we know that we it is a, a role. That role is giving access to secret resource, and only allowed verbs are get and list, right? And if you want to change the verbs and all that, you can do it on the fly. You'll be given with what things a role should be allowed to do. Your question should will be kind of very specific during the exam, so don't worry about it what will you write there, because it'll be provided to you. This is how you are creating a role. Now once role is created, that role should be assigned to a user also, right? So how do we do that? We do that using cluster role binding, or role binding. Sorry, I was saying cluster role. We are creating a role because it is namespace based, and we are assigning that to a user now, right? So what we are creating a glue basically, which binds a user. Here it is called dev user, right? So we will create a dev user. It is not created yet. The way we are creating things here is we are creating a role, then we are creating glue also. So we created role, we created this role binding. Everything is ready. As soon as we create the user will have access to get and list the secrets in dev namespace, right? How do we create role binding? So you create a role binding, and similar thing, same example, you can do this and do hyphen hyphen help. If you do hyphen hyphen help, you can see how it is giving all the details, right? So it is showing you how you can define roles. Now one thing you need to keep in mind, look here, it says cluster role and here it says role. So this is very important to keep in mind. Are you create are you doing this binding for a role, or are you doing this binding at cluster level? Don't mix these things up, because if you do, they'll deduct some marks from you. Another thing to note, when you are specifying a service account during the exam, most likely they will not ask you to specify users like this or groups like this, right? So here you can see it is creating a role binding is being created for user 1, 2 and a group, right? But during the exam they will ask you to do this for service accounts. I'm kind of 99% sure they'll ask you for service accounts. The way it is done is, this one is your namespace, okay? So it will be named this way: your namespace colon then account within that namespace. So don't make mistake of not writing it properly, because it will not work correctly if you kind of make that mistake, right? Anyways, all right, coming back, we are showing here a role binding. We are giving it a name and then writing what role. And this is our a kind of dummy user that I'm just making up, right? Then namespace, it is same namespace where our role was created. And I'm doing dry run, and just to show you what it will do, if I run it, you can see it is showing it like this, right? If you are actually trying to do it, remove dry run and OYAML, and it'll create for you. Remember, during the exam, always try to do things imperatively, do hands on before you go and sit for the exam. These exams are intensive, and you really need to know what you are doing, right? So similarly, once you do all that, you can validate. There is a command called auth can I. Okay, so auth can I get secrets from where? We are saying within the namespace dev, and we are also specifying as a which user. So remember this command. So can I, right? This command, again, it will also have help. You can see how you can query different things, right? System service account, this that, right? So it shows you how you can query from different namespaces or using different names. But try running this, because this is the only way for you to validate if you did good, if you answered the question right. Okay. Next is creating a service account, right? So I think I should have done it the other way around, right? So but this will still work. Why? Because it doesn't matter if this user exists or not. What Kubernetes is looking into it is there a role, is there a role binding for this particular name, and does that binding allow whatever operation we are trying to do. We are looking for getting the secrets. Can dev user get secrets? Even if user is not created, it will still work if we run the above commands, right? So let's try doing it. So let's do it. I'm removing the dry run. Okay, so let's say k create ns dev, right? So created a namespace. So I'll modify this. I'll add that namespace creation in it, right? Namespace is created. Then after that, I created a role. Now role is done. Let's do a role binding. You can see I completed the role binding. Now if I run this, and let's see, it says yes, right? So can I get secrets? Can I get pods? No. Why? Because when I created this role, you know, you can see here, I said this user can get or list secrets only, nothing related to parts. So that's why it is not able to do it. So this is your friend. This command is your friend. You need to know how to go and validate. Okay. All right. With that, I'll show you how to create a service account here. I'm kind of creating one CI/CD bot service account. If you really want to do it, you can create it. But uh, there is official documentation when you go on kubernetes.io, right? So go here, go to documentation, and you can search for create, let's say, user, right? How to create user. There are a lot of discussions, but then authentication, right? You can go into this RBAC kind of thing, right? It talks about how things are done. But again, if you are following my documentation, you really don't need to do that. Just click here and you'll go on using RBAC, right? All right, great. Coming back to where we were, I've given some kind of practical examples how you can do it, like we just did. uh, you can kind of run these commands, play in your own time. I listed this common mistakes as I was saying earlier as well, right? A role binding can reference a cluster role to give cluster level permissions within a single namespace, right? So this is a common mistake. Your intention was to do a role binding to a role, but instead you did it as kind of cluster role. So that cluster role binding is cluster wide, and you cannot scope a cluster role binding to a specific namespace. You are trying to, for example, use cluster role binding here. Instead of role binding, you say you are trying to do a cluster role binding, but you are also specifying namespace. Even if you specify, it has no effect, because cluster is entire cluster. It is cluster wide, right? All right. So there are some other details that I have mentioned here. Always check using auth can. And I've given some things for you. I specifically mentioned about this, like service account, staging, CI/CD bot, right? Try creating a cluster role, going over it, and see if it doesn't work. You are stuck somewhere, let me know. Post some comments on my video or on my LinkedIn, and I'll be able to respond back to you. Getting to the next topic, which says manage cluster using kubeadium, right? So this one, manage lifecycle and all that, right? So creating your cluster and all. Understand this, before you do all this, okay, you need to know how to manage the underlying infrastructure. So if I go here, and you can either search for creating a kubeadium cluster, but before you do that, always go to this install kubeadium. Why go there, right? If you go here, I'll tell you what are the requirements, right? You need a kubeadium project. Then, check your IP. It also shows you port requirement. Then it tells you your swap related configuration, field swap on to false, right? All these settings that are listed here, they are very important. I would say go through it, understand, and how to actually install. If you are going to install, let's say, kubeadium, right? How do you install that? Or other packages, for example, here we are doing it, right? So this is important for you to understand. It was something I cannot show you live. It'll take too long, I think, if I start to do this. But very simple. You are adding couple of repositories, then you are accepting the keys, update, installing kubelet, kubeadium, and kubecli. Then you are marking hold. Mark hold means your whenever somebody runs kubeadium update, these version will not be touched, they will not be updated. We'll look into the update section as well, where we are updating these things when we do version updates, right? How do we do that? Finally, once everything is done, you are enabling kubelet, because kubelet is something that helps you run your containers, right? All right, getting back. So we are doing similar things here. We are defining some configuration files. When you start your cluster, you are defining your power side or network. You are specifying your control plane endpoint if you have one, right? But otherwise, this should be enough, I believe, to create your cluster, right? So if we go in documentation, here you'll see somewhere it running. So it is running these commands, chown and all that. It is running a join init and args, right? So you can add this API advertise address if you have more than one interfaces on your virtual machine. You can specify what IP address it should advertise as API address, right? So all these settings you can use to create. So what it'll create, it'll create your control plane node. Once this is done, you can basically make your worker nodes join, but how do you join? You run it like this, right? But I have mentioned here SHA-256 and then something, right? How do you get this SHA-256 something? You run this command kubeadm create token, then it will give you the output, and you use that on a worker node. So you log in on worker node. Those nodes should have kind of communication between each other, and then it'll be able to kind of join the cluster. Next is yeah, this is something you should know, because there are a lot of certificates involved when you are working on Kubernetes. You should at least understand what these commands are, or what do they mean, and how to run these. Most of them, uh, during exam you should be able to, I don't know if it will be here available here, but if you do man open SSL, then you know man hyphen a open SSL, for example, if I do that, right? So you can do open SSL RSA, I think open SSL RSA, and it might have some commands. Yeah, so it shows you examples, right? You see the section examples. You really need to know some of the tools and where to look for help for them. You don't really need to go on this website and search. Some of the information is available within your terminal itself, right? All right. So finally, cluster lifecycle management, right? What is lifecycle management? Basically, updating the clusters. When you are, let's say, working on your cluster, you want to add a node, delete a node, all that, right? How do you do that? So if you want to get rid of a node, you drain it. What it does, basically, anything that is running on the node, it gets reassigned to other nodes. Ignore daemon sets. Why? Because daemon sets run on all the nodes. There is no other choice. You'll have to ignore, right? Delete local data. It is dangerous. Be careful, right? Node one. This is something I just made up a name, but if you have node one, you can do it that way, right? Cordon means nothing new will come on this. Uh, but if you, let's say you are doing some maintenance, and after that you want to kind of bring node 1 back, you can do uncordon. But if you have done this, right, then there is no coming back, I believe. Another way, deleting a node, you can delete the node like this and then go to that node and do a reset. So kubeadm reset will try to revert the changes whatever it has done. It has created some directories, deployed some services, created some instances, for example kubectl and all the kubelet and other those configurations. It'll try to revert everything with the help of reset. I think it has the option called hyphen hyphen all as well. You can do that, right? Another thing, if your certificate is about to expire, you can use kubectl cert. So I would say look for help of kubeadm, right? And you'll see a lot of options. I don't believe this will come in exam, but still, I'm listing it here just for your knowledge that it exists. There is something like this, right? How do you implement high availability? This is one of the uh, requirements listed in the exam, right? It was listed here. I think implement configure highly available control plane. What does it mean? It means more than one control plane node. What if your Cube API dies, right? So how does it work? Generally, you need to have minimum three nodes, so that raft. There is a mechanism called or you know raft census used by HCD to ensure data is always in sync and there is a defined leader. You need to have three nodes. With two, you can it could have that split brain condition where both are saying I'm the leader, right? So three you need to have. But end goal is to have your API server highly available, just in case one node you are doing maintenance, you are doing, let's say, firmware updates on underlying infrastructure, or you are doing operating system updates and all that, right? So for that you need highly available control plane. So how do you join control plane node? So you are joining with the help of token, and you are saying discovery token CA hash. You are providing hash of the discovery token, And this hyphen control plane option is what allowing it to become a control plane node. What does it mean by control plane node, right? It is adding a node that will run a copy of API server. It will run copy of your scheduler. It will also run a copy of your HCD, possibly if it is within the cluster. Then the old node, how do you rotate the leadership role, right? You can go to that old node. If you want to do maintenance, you can shut down kube API server. How do you do that? It's a static part. It's created using etc Kubernetes manifest. You could literally go and move that file kubeapi.yaml somewhere else, and it'll kubelet will shut it off. That is one way of doing it. Or you could think about doing your updates and all that. You can stop kubelet service and then stop your pod manually. That way also you can do it. We are talking about keep alive D. Basically, if you're doing it in small home labs and all that, right? In clouds, your cloud service provider is providing you a load balancer, right? If you are doing it at home, you'll have to think about having a virtual IP. If you have kind of home lab setup, right? How, once your cluster is highly available, you have, let's say, three nodes, right? How do you send traffic to all three nodes? Like, there should be something common, right? So that common need to be a kind of load balancer. So keep live D works as that kind of virtual IP, or the entry point for your cluster. If it comes in exam, just remember that you can use kubeadm join and then do hyphen hyphen help and look for options for control plane. Let's see, kubeadm join hyphen hyphen help, and search for control plane, right? You can see generate manifests of a new control plane components, right? So that is what we were looking at, right? So how do you join? You are defining endpoint and all that. Again, hyphen hyphen help is very useful command. You should remember this whenever you are kind of doing something during the exam. This one is important, and I'm sure it'll come during the exam. This is version updates. Very high level. Remember these three lines. Whenever you have a question, you need to update primary control plane node, then secondary additional control plane nodes, then finally update the worker nodes, right? How do you update your primary control plane node? You go do sudo apt-get update. Then with cache medicine, you are basically searching for the version. For example, if our cluster is 1.33, yeah, we are searching for 1.34. Let's see, qctl get nodes, right? So we are running 1.33.2, right? So let's see if this environment will let me do this, right? And we did that. And now if we search, it says since we have this 1332, I can go maybe 1335, right? From 2 to 5, I can think about doing that. Here I'm talking about doing it to 1.34, but anyways, let's look into this, right? So I'm doing unhold, and I am remember I was talking about hold. Here we are doing unhold. We are going to update kubeadm version, right? And then we are specifying what version should it get updated to, right? So sudo apt mark unhold, then update, then apt-get install kubeadm version 1.3. So let's see, 1.33.5, right? Let's see if I do 133, what will it do? Dot 5 hyphen 1.1. Once it is done, we will again set it to hold, right? So I should have done to ADM version before doing it, but anyways, now we are at 1335, right? So why did we have to do this? If we look at our nodes, they are at 1332. Our KubeADM is 1335. Because KubeADM is the tool that will help us update the version, right? So that's why you need to update KubeADM first, right? Then you run upgrade plan, right? KubeADM upgrade plan. You can also specify version here. If you do hyphen hyphen help, right, it'll show you. You can specify version. So during exam, if they say go to a particular version, then use version option, right? So we can say this 1335, right? So now you can see it is running pre-flight checks, it is running cluster health checks and all that. Let's see if it can. So now it says, can it update to all that, right? It completed the planning. It says it is 1.332, it need to go to 5. What all component will get updated and what command should you run next, right? So you can do this way. If I don't specify, it'll anyways go to this version, right? But I'm just showing you that during exam you need to know this, right? Okay, we did this. This is on your control plane node. Once you're done, you'll see something like this, right? And then you can go and start updating your nodes, right? So node update, you need to get into that node. You cannot run it from control plane node itself, right? You need to SSH into that node, right? So it says, are you ready? This, that. I'm going to run it. Not sure if it'll break this web interface environment, but let's see. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, at least you know the process, right? Uh, all right. Meanwhile, I'll open another tab and let me get into kget nodes. I had a node SSH node 01. Let's see. Oh, very nice. I'm able to get into that node, and here I can do this upgrade node, but I think I should think about kind of changing it, but let's see. So what happens with the upgrade node? It is downloading kubelet configuration. Can I do it in parallel? No, I need to make sure this thing finishes first, because it is taking some backups. For example, here you can see it is taking backup. It is rewriting configurations. It is gonna push all the changes up in Kubernetes. So I need to wait for my control plane to finish updating. As soon as it is done, I'll be able to go on my worker node and run these commands. So go run kubeadm upgrade. Then we are doing drain. This drain you can run on master node. Sitting on master node, you are writing the name of the node. So what it is doing, as I was saying earlier, it'll move all the workloads that are running on this node to other nodes so that your node is safe. You are not impacting any live workload, right? So you do that, ignore daemon sets because they run on all nodes. There is no other option. You'll have to ignore them. Drain is also doing cordon for you so that no new workloads come on this node. Once this finishes, you are doing exactly same thing. You are updating kubelet. You are updating. Uh, okay, I need to change this. It is not just kubelet. Kubelet. It is kube ADM and kubelet, right? So there is kubelet, kubectl. I need to update kubeadm as well here. Okay, so once you do that, I think you are good to go. Basically, I think let's go to documentation. See, kubectl version, you're checking the version of the cluster. Then yeah, so this is missing in my documentation. That's why I was saying. So first you are updating kubeadm. After that you are running upgrade node, right? So I'll fix my documentation. I'll include this, right? So you update the kubeadm so that it can handle all the changes that are there between different versions. So you can see it is success. And before I do this, I will follow this command, install kubedium by, and let's go and do it on this node. Right, before I do that, I'll pick up my command from history. Yes, this one. And hold on, let's do this, and hopefully, okay, good. All right, so we have version, and then we are going to put it on hold again, right? uh, all right, so it is gonna unhold kubedium, download that specific version. Once it is installed, it is again kind of setting a hold on it, right? Then once that is done, we are allowed to download. Basically, when I run this, you can see update reading configuration from kubedium config. It is a config map in kube system namespace. Using that, it is downloading things. Now our node is almost ready, but what need to happen? uh, all this need to happen. Node need to be drained, and then why it need to be drained? Because we are going to update kubelet. That's why I was getting confused. I was saying it need to be kubedium because I was missing this part. So we'll update kubelet and kubectl because we run kubectl commands, right? Not mandatory, but kubelet is. So you do this and then give the particular version, and then after that you are going to do a daemon reload and restart kubelet, and your node will be ready, right? So let's do this. Let's get into the master node. Let's get kubectl get nodes. Am I missing something in kubeadm? So sudo update cache medicine mark. You did kubedium version, you did plan, you did apply, and it is going on node and updating. Okay, so let's update this as well. This is on master, again master, because we did not update kubelet. It is showing 133, right? So that is a problem. We will have to update this as well. So 1.1 1.33.5. So now if we get nodes, and you can see version is 5, right? This is our control plane. It's in ready state. Everything is done on control plane. So yes, I was missing this part. Again, I didn't have to do this because it already did for me. If you can see, it is doing here, right? But you know, to be consistent, let's say to follow the documentation, we can do that too, right? Nothing happens with this, but anyways, all right, so going to update our nodes now, right? So we downloaded different versions, we installed our kubedium, and we did kubedium upgrade node, right? And then before I do anything else, I can copy command from here. Exact same command goes on our worker node. You run it. There is something wrong. Hyphen slash. That hold is a problem. Yeah, so this one, it didn't like that. Yeah, so okay, sudo front log. There is another process using it. That's all right. That's not a big deal. Right, hold on. Going back to our master 2, just want to make sure it is already set on hold. Let's see if I can do it now. There is a process that is holding this PID, ESEF, grep-IE. So looks like it is still trying to run. Oh, because it copied with the this one, it sent it to background, and you can see this is what it was showing. But anyways, now it is out of that, and you can see I set it on hold, right? So it is on hold. We did this, right? Drain, and then you can do all that. Since I didn't have the workloads, I didn't have to do the drain. But once everything is said and done, you go on this node. So before I do this, before I run that command, right? If we check for kget nodes, you can see it is already showing your version. Why? Because you can see it says restarting services, right? Otherwise, without that, it will not be. So now our cluster is on 1335. So when we started working on it, it was on 1332. All right. So that was a good rundown of it. How do you take backup? Remember this variable. If you don't use this HCD CTL API, then you'll not be able to kind of use some of these options. So, in exam, I think it is optional, but still, if you want to kind of look for it during the exam, at CDCTL, search for this, and it shows tasks, right? Backup and permissions. There are discussions happening, but at the same time, if you go here, before you begin, it tells you how to run commands, right? And that variable I was talking about, it is right here, right? So uh, just understand how you are taking backup with snapshot save. If you need to restore, you are restoring it like this, right? Very simple. Extension interface, CSI, I've given some details about them. I don't believe anything will come in exam from these. You really need to understand what those are. Similar story for CRDs. I've given some example how to define a custom resource definition. I also don't expect anything to come in exam, but still, if you want to do it, you can. For example, this one, let's say we are on tab 1 in our cluster, and if I run it, and hold on, echo, let's say paste everything, kubectl apply hyphen f hyphen, and you can see it created a custom resource definition for me. And if I do a grep, you can see it says something was created, right? um, I think you just need to know what it does. Installing things with or operators with Helm, I've given some commands, you can use them. All you need to know is how to use Helm, how to add a repo, how to install, how to get values. For example, here I have shown Helm get all, right? So that is all you need to know. Otherwise, I don't expect anything special coming in the exam. It should be simple, very simple task. But still, you need to know. Sometimes they might say change this value and do this install using Helm in a particular namespace. Unless you have done hands-on, unless you have played with Helm, you might end up experiencing some problems. So you can see it downloaded, it is installing, it takes a bit of time. But yeah, I've given some kind of details to you, some inputs on what I feel like are important things, and there is some homework for you. Again, I've given links to all the documentation, everything that I have referenced. It is going back to original kubernetes.io documentation. Yeah, with that, I'll kind of stop recording, and good luck. If you run into any trouble, you have questions, you want to discuss something, feel free to comment on my video, and we can maybe possibly do another video or dive deeper into it, and possibly connect also using LinkedIn, and go from there. And yeah, good luck with your exam, and thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to me.